All right, welcome back to another edition of the Forts Athletics Life and Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Charles Inferna, and we have a very special guest coming off a podium finish this past week's USATF Indoor Nationals in the women's weight throw. Lara Boman, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Did I get that pronunciation right?
Almost Lara, but thank you. That's okay.
I'm so sorry. I know I married a speech pathologist. That's horrible.
It's all good.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time, just coming back from that beautiful facility in Washington, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got started in athletics?
So I did not throw until college, and I think that's probably one of the most distinct things about my path so far.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up, I played soccer. My family moved around a lot, so soccer was always the thing that any school you could do at recess. My dad was really into it. He was my first coach when I was really young. So wherever we lived, Minnesota, California, I would play soccer. So going into high school, I played soccer for my high school. I played club soccer. And then I also swam in middle school. I swam the 50 free. I had no technique. It was just power. It was pretty ugly. And then I was a cross country skier, so endurance sports. I went to school at the University of South Dakota. I basically chose the school because I could play Division I soccer. I was able to graduate and basically minimize any potential debts because of soccer and academics. And it was close enough to my family, but far enough away where I felt like I could start to forge my own path. So I went to USD, went there to play soccer, did not know what I would major in, ended up majoring in physics. And I was on the soccer team for 2.5 years, so for 3 seasons. And freshman year of any sport is a huge transition. Freshman year of soccer, you basically dive into like 2-a-days every single day for 3 weeks. Your first day is a fitness test. It was a great learning experience. And I felt really lucky that for those 2.5 years, I got to meet some great girls. I really got to be pushed and challenged both physically and mentally. I didn't earn significant playing time. I wasn't a huge impact player, but I really prided myself on working really hard and just trying to push my teammates in practice, because I felt like even if I'm not on the field that much, at least I can do what I can in practice. And I'm not saying that happened all the time, like that's the ideal.
Right.
But it was good, and then I started really living lifting, right? Like I lifted a little bit in high school as kind of part of a CrossFit type gym, but I had never really been on a specific lifting program. Started lifting and I was like, wow, this is really fun. I love this. My body is fit for lifting. I would always pass my fitness test first try, which I took a lot of pride in, but I will tell you, it took so much effort. And lifting fit my strengths much better. So I was a little bit like, I don't know, like it was good, but it wasn't everything I think I thought it would be, and that's okay. But I remember I'd be in the weight room, I would go up and just like do extra stretching and stuff. And I would see AG train because he was in his 2015, or it was 2016. So that was my junior year. AG was training for the Olympics, the Olympic trials. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. I'm kind of scared of him. But he would just like recognize strength in athletes. So we all looked it up to him, knew what he did, all kind of intimidated, but definitely respected him. Basically, then my junior year, I was so determined to like make an impact and get on the field. I would just do like extra practices during preseason, which is not necessary. So if you're already doing 3-a-days, I didn't need to be doing extra drills on the side, but I learned a lesson the hard way. I tore my labrum in my right hip. So after, I think like a month of the season, I went through this period where a lot of pain. It hurt to like stand and walk, and soccer was really tough to do. Hit a few walls with just figuring out what it was. And eventually it was like, all right, you tore your labrum. Let's see if it gets better without surgery. But if we need surgery, we'll do it in November. So I basically went through 2 months of the soccer season, just going into the weight room, doing upper body, and like trying to figure things out. It was really down at the time because I was there to figure out this sport and it wasn't really working. And I happened to live with some track girls, and I just remember like we would talk about practice and they were so nice. Like it was so fun. They ended up being some of my best friends. And just on a whim, I remember talking to one of my roommates, Brooke. Then I talked to Megan Dennis, who was a GA in the weight room, and kind of was like, what's throwing like? Just like, why not? Right. And the specifics of how everything happened, elude me a little bit now, just because it happened pretty quickly. But essentially in the span of about a week to 2 weeks, Megan talked to AG. AG was like, yeah, like, but I can't recruit her, like NCAA stuff. And I basically went out with Megan and she took me out to throw hammers, and I had no idea, right? Like, I think I did track in 8th and then half of 9th grade and like triple jumped and ran the 400, and that was it. So I went out, I have video of it. It went like 20 feet. I think I did 7 lines and a release. And I was like, this is so cool. And kind of just as like something in my gut was like, you need to try to do this. Like, this is the right thing to do, because my best friends were on the team. I felt like my strength was a strength. Soccer hadn't just been the path I thought it would be. And it just like something felt right. I knew who AG was. I respected him. So I basically went into his office and asked him to walk on. And like to this day, I get like emotional thinking about it, but he had no reason to say yes, right? You're a Division I coach. You're expected to win conference titles, get athletes to first rounds. And I had no experience. I was already a junior. I had a torn labrum in my hip. And all I had to offer was the fact that I could work hard and I at least knew how to lift and was somewhat strong for a soccer player, not for a thrower.
Right.
And he said yes. And it was like so cool. And I'd asked my soccer coaches for permission. So I trained for 7 days. And on the 7th day, we had a mock meet. And I threw weight in the meet, and it was like, oh, this is so cool. And I think it was a 19 because it was a mock meet, like it was an inter squad. Right. And the soccer team all showed up. It was the coolest things. They were so supportive. They like made signs. They cheered during warmups because they didn't know what a warmup was. Like, truthfully, I didn't really either. And the soccer coaches and I was like, hey, I can't do these 2 things. I'm going to quit this sport. They were super supportive. So I had a ton of support. And it just so happened that my hip felt fine throwing. I couldn't cut. I couldn't sprint. I couldn't catch a squat. I couldn't squat deep, and I couldn't really catch a clean. And I couldn't kick a ball. Like, it still hurts to kick a soccer ball, but everything that hammer throw required was pain-free. So it was like, why get surgery if I don't need it? So I basically just walked on and then joined. November 15th was the first day I threw hammer in 2016. Then my first season was the 2017 indoor season. So that's how it all started. And it's so fun to look back on too.
That is so interesting, because like I coach Division III, so they're really most of the throwers, I'd say probably 90% of the kids that I've ever worked with never threw in high school. They were part of some other team. Their friends or roommates come out and they, like, I'm not going to say no. Sure, like you're 6'2", you have long arms. Yeah, you want to throw a discus? Sure, why not? Oh, you know how to lift. There's not. Really isn't a prerequisite there. But when you first, like, talking about AG and stuff, was there like on campus, do people like know, like, hey, he's been to 3 Olympics, like he is a great weight thrower, hammer thrower? Like, is there like I don't want to say like an aura about him, but like, does anybody know? Like,
I would say, I mean, I'm biased now because I've now been working with him for 5 years, but like when I was on the soccer team, like we knew, I think athletics knows. I think general campus, maybe not as much, but athletics, there's definitely an awareness of that. And I just remember, like, when we'd be in the weight room, he would just be present and be like cheering us on as a coach from a different sport, which was really cool. Like I would be doing like chin-ups or whatever, and he'd be like really hype about it. And I was like, this is so cool. Like, oh, I'm getting recognized for this thing. And it was just a nice sense of encouragement. So I would say it's that actually first that people know. And then his own accomplishments, people know it, but they know him first for how he treats people in athletics, which is like really encouraging. So.
No, that's great. I would say I competed against AG, but it really wasn't a competition. We competed in like Kent State, like Bowling Green, Baldwin Wallace, things like that. And I remember in 2008, Judd put together like a last chance meet, like, so AG Kibwe threw.
Oh, cool.
And he's like, hey, do you want to come out and throw too? So myself and a couple training partners went out, but it was more to fill the field, right? So they needed like 9 guys, 10 guys. So when we would like PR at like 60 meters, I followed AG. I was the 9th guy. So he threw like 78. Then they pulled the tape in at 62. But it's so interesting, like, now it's full circle that he's producing great throwers that, are just as, at his caliber. When you started throwing those 7 days, like, were you like how, you said you felt something in your gut. Like,
Mhm.
was there something that you were like, like I could be really good at this? Or is it just,
I did not care how good I was.
Mhm,
And I honestly, like, I love getting better, but it's still kind of part of it. Like, I didn't care how good I was. I just knew that it was so cool to have my work reflect in improvement.
mhm,
And that my strengths were recognized as strengths, because my strengths were not necessarily as relevant to soccer.
mhm,
Like, being really strong is great, but like, you have to play the game. There's this tactical part of it.
right.
There's speed, there's finesse, and like, I wasn't, I mean, I'm 5'7", 190. Like, I weighed about that much as a soccer player. That's just how
Mhm,
I am. That's how I'm
mhm,
built. And at the end of the day, like, I'm not going to say I hit my ceiling, but there was just this potential to be able to work hard and get better at something. And the throws was really fun too. It was just a lot of people going out and throwing things and having fun with it. And I think that attracted me as well. Cause like I said, I had friends on the team, and I recognized the dynamic was something that would just be cool to be a part of.
So when you started, I took some notes here. So your first season, you throw the weight 52 feet and
Yep.
178.7 in the hammer.
hmm
Your second season throwing 17, 18, right? So you go 63.7 in the weight and 213 in the hammer.
hmm
What do you attribute that to? Like, that's I mean, almost 50 feet, 40 feet in the hammer in one
Yeah.
season.
Yeah, I finally had a full training year because I had started throwing in November. So I literally started throwing and they were like peaking, like getting ready for indoor. So I'm just like, I have no clue what this is, but whatever. I mean, I remember going to my first, like, I was the last person on the conference team,
Mhm.
I think, for both indoor and outdoor. And I think the only reason I made it is AG says that they came back from a meet one day, and I would just be like, great, I'm not traveling. I get extra practices in. So I'd go
Right.
throw. And I think the head coach drove by and was like, okay, she can make it. So I was the last one on the team. I was like right off of scoring.
Mhm.
But I remember being at conference and being like, why is this ring bigger than the other one? And it was a discus ring. And I knew that, but I had
Right.
never like seen them next to each other. So
Right.
just stuff like that. But anyways, I had a full year of training. So I was able to just like lock in and actually have a fall season.
Mhm.
And I truthfully just didn't know what the marks meant. So it didn't matter what I threw. So there was no ceiling.
Mhm.
Right. Then the second part is I threw both of those marks at conference meets, and I loved a conference because it was like my way of giving back to the team that had given me a chance.
Mhm.
I felt like a team sport athlete in those meets.
Mhm.
So if you looked at my meet average, it was nowhere close to those marks, but I would like be able to throw a big one at those meets because I would want so badly to like thank AG for letting me on the
Mhm.
team. I'd want to be like, thanks to the track team. And there'd be like the cross country runners, and it would really get me excited. So I think part of it was that dynamic. But like my average wasn't, I think my average, I like did the math actually this fall because I wanted to see what my meet
Mhm.
averages were. I think it was like, I don't remember. It wasn't 65 meters and it
Sure.
wasn't 63 feet.
Mhm.
But yeah, just consistent training and not really caring about how far it went.
So I've heard stories of Ashland's like fall conditioning and AG being a disciple of Judd. So
Yeah.
what's that fall conditioning look like? You're starting to get acclimated to the team. You're learning how
So
to throw. Like,
I think the thing that will describe it best, first, I love fall conditioning, and I don't think that's shared
Mhm.
by, but I like it. I think it's fun. It's like you get to push yourself and you don't think, you just work out. But
Mhm.
what I'm gonna say is like soccer, we had our fitness test and it was a mile, half mile, quarter mile, 200, 100, and they were split. There's a time interval for each. It was like a 6:30 mile, 90-second rest, 3:30 half mile, 60-second rest. I still remember all these, so on
Mhm.
and so forth, with like a minute between. Fall conditioning was harder than any fitness test I took.
Mhm.
Like, I never threw up in soccer, and I almost puked running stairs one day, but it's so fun. Like, it's just so fun, and everyone comes together because it's so difficult. And we still do it as post-collegiates.
Right.
So it's funny because I teach at USD and I'll have students like walking across the field and I'm like throwing med balls and almost throwing up. But
Right.
yeah, it's really tough, but it's so fun too.
So what do you so for the athletes that are going to listen and they hate fall conditioning and they
Mhm.
hate everything up until December when the season openers start, how critical and how important is it to you? Well, was it as an athlete or a collegiate athlete, and now as a post collegiate, those like August, September, October, November training months, like how critical of components is that to get you ready for the rigors of the season?
Well, I think there's the mental side where once you go through your conditioning cycle,
Mhm.
everything else feels easy. And it won't be, but everything else is like, I made it through conditioning. This is fine. So that's the mental and physical part. But I also know physically, I mean, first, the rest period that precedes it is equally as important. And I learned that lesson the hard way. 2 years ago, I didn't take the full rest because I would just work out to deal with my emotions. And then very quickly, it was like, oh, my body's not working how it should. So the rest before is just as important. But I just see it as the base, and you're getting fit enough to be able to make sure all of your throws in practice are able to be at an intensity that will make you better. You know, like 26 throws doesn't seem to be a lot, but taking 26 throws at high intensity, I'm gassed. And if I didn't have a work capacity that could handle that, there's no way that those 26 throws would be productive. If only 10 of them are productive, I've just wasted 16 possible throws. So if that's a mental trick that helps, I would say that's maybe one way to look at it.
So speaking of the mental stuff, when with working with AG and you're getting ready for conference championships and you're throwing at the regionals and nationals and things, is there like a lead up to that? Like, does he spend time working with the throwers or other athletes on the team in regards to okay, one week out, 5 days out, 3 days out, this is what we do when we get there? Like, does he teach that, or is it more of you just watch what your teammates do in regards to like getting ready for those conference meets and nationals?
One thing I really appreciate about AG is he lets you learn by experiencing it. Like, I make mistakes all the time. I made a ton of mistakes in college. I make mistakes all the time as a post-collegiate. And he'll be like, yep, that was wrong. But if I had never made it, I never would have learned it and actually abided by it. So part of it was just trial and error, but the other part is that it was very individual depending on your style, how you throw, what you need. Like, I usually just need someone to tell me to relax and that it's fun. And then he would just do that, you know? And then he would also, though, set up situations in practice, and he does this too, sets up situations where you have to throw what you need to throw on the day. So you figure out how to do it, how to deal with the pressure. So like, we constantly have those in the fall, even in the winter. So when you get to the pressure, even throwing under pressure, not all the time, but enough of the time so that it doesn't feel foreign. And it's just another day. Yeah.
So how, I mean, I get that. Like, I researched that, like I've published papers on that, but when you're working with an 18 to 23-year-old, how do you how do you get them to kind of like wrap their minds around that it's that those high pressure situations, or what they think is high pressure? Like, I've been to nationals. The first year I went, I was a grad assistant coaching one of my former teammates, and she was ranked 12th going into D3 nationals in the hammer. I was like, man, you know, she's going to throw 50 meters in 2005. You would all American at D3. Now you don't even go. And she watched somebody else warm up the day before from California. We never, you know, and she's like, Coach, I need to take more throws. I was like, no, I think you're good. Like, I think you're ready to go. She's like, no, I got to take more throws. And I was like, oh boy. Like, so she threw the next day, like 46 meters. It was the first time I had experienced like an athlete like that. I mean, I watched it happen. So for those, how do you, like, is there any, besides just letting it happen, I mean, you hope that there's another opportunity? Do you have any like tips or suggestions for the younger throwers, how they can, you know, prepare for those types of situations?
I think two things came to mind. One is, I've always felt that AG has always made sure that, I would say that, like, when I think about my own personal journey, that like how far I throw doesn't determine my worth as a person or an athlete. So I was never worried about like, oh, I'm like a whatever. I knew that it wasn't the end of the world. It wasn't the end of anything. But the second was just like finding a way that it's fun, to make it fun, however fun is for someone. And for me, fun is relaxing, and just like realizing how ridiculous it is that this sport is throwing things. Like, I think about that every meet now as a post-collegiate, like at USA's. That's all. Like, I was just like, this is so silly. And then I relax and throw it, and that won't work for everyone. And I know like that wasn't AG's approach, but that's what works for me. But like, still just knowing that like, even if your worst case scenario comes true, usually the consequences aren't that big. And sometimes they will be. Like, if a scholarship's on the line, I think it could be. Like, I was at the first time I made it to first rounds, I remember warming up, and Ben Hammer was our discus thrower who was there. and we were warming up and just kind of like goofing off. And I was like, AG, why is everyone else like quiet? He was like, why is no one else enjoying this? He was like,
Right.
well, all their scholarships ride on this. So for them, it's like a lot of pressure, and their coaches are, worried about if their athlete makes it. I was like, okay, whatever. So just a way, I think just finding a way to make it fun would be whatever that is for a person.
And it's so interesting. Oh no, it's just so interesting. Like, from somebody who's competed at 3 Olympics, like just like have fun. Like I wonder if
have fun. And it's even in his books. Like I've read his training books because I didn't know what to expect from a year of practice as a post-collegiate. Like how do your marks change through a year? And he'd literally write have fun in his books. And I was like, okay, if AG can do it, I can do it.
So you've actually seen these golden like Bibles of training journals that he has?
Yes. Yep. I've gone through them, and I'm still actually working on the last few years because I just feel like I learned, like, in the fall, you're not throwing as far and you're like, oh, right. I gotten worse. No, okay, relax. You're going to be this far under, you're progressing. And it would just help me get a sense for what a year could be like. And for, I don't know, just like what a progression can look like. Just understand the system more.
No, that makes sense. The reason why I ask is I'm a huge proponent of journaling and keeping track. And what I've noticed over my years of coaching is that the kids that actually keep track of how many throws they take, how they feel, their rest, recovery, the lifts in the gym, things like that, they tend to throw farther. Yeah. I can't prove that besides having, the kids go to conference and nationals and things. How important is that to you? Like you posted something, I don't know if it was on TikTok or Instagram, like I took 1,100 throws this month and I taught this many classes. Like how, so 1,100 throws in a month. I don't think most college kids take that many in a year or two.
I think it was like I took 1,124 before indoors or something. Yeah. So like through the whole season.
Right.
Yeah, I love my training book. I mean, I feel like AG always, even when I started, he had ways for us to record our stuff. So like the first book is like a single sheet that has every day of practice and my best mark written. It's kind of cool to look back. Like I remember the first day I made it over 45 meters. I took a picture where the ball landed and I still have it. It was so exciting. Like it was such a big deal. So I have that in my book, but now my book has, all the throwing, all the lifting. And then I also record how many hours I sleep each night, my body weight, what I do for recovery, what I do for mental training, what film I watch, and then my goals for the day. And those are just the things that some of them keep me accountable, but like it just helps me see and look back and have confidence from my own preparation.
Were you that detailed of a note taker in college too? Like, do you have like training? No, nothing like that.
Still, but I just didn't write down all the extra stuff. Like, so I would write down my whole practice would be in there, all of our lifts, and I would journal or I would write down like, technique stuff that made sense. Or if I watched film, I would write down like what I saw, but I didn't have it organized as much. That was more when I transitioned into post-collegiate training, and I realized that I needed to make sure that I was leaving no stones unturned because the sacrifices were more so than they were in college to do it. So
it sounds like you're kind of busy. I mean, you teach classes, you're a post-collegiate thrower, like you have a life and things like that. When you were in college though, when you were, so your 18-19 season was your senior year, or was it your last year?
And then what was it? Yeah, 18-19 was my 5th year. So I was able to get a 5th year because I had my 5-year clock, but so it started when I started playing soccer.
Right.
I was able to get 3 seasons of track and field, so 2.5 years in college. So yeah, 18-19 was my last year of college track. And then also for anyone younger listening, like my PR was not as, or my season best actually went down in hammer that year. And I don't know. I think I wished I had heard that when I was younger. Like it happens. Remember AG was like, you're going to have to fill in the gaps because I jumped from 61 to 65. Sure. I was like, what does that mean? And then I very quickly found out what it means, which was like a lot of meets between 61 and 65 and no meets over it. Sure. And that was tough mentally, but my meet average went up. But yeah, so 18-19 was my last year of college track. And then I was also a GA. So part of it was, I think I wasn't used to working and being in school and training at the same time. So the stress was kind of hard to deal with at times, not the whole reason at all, but like definitely had to figure out how to deal with things.
So that particular season, was there anything that happened that you were like, wow, like I should continue training? Like were there talks of, I got a chance at the Olympic trials in 2020? Like, was there like, anything like that yet? Or is it just, I'm going to graduate and I'm not going to throw anymore?
So I had actually already pretty drastically changed my life plan because I had wanted to graduate in 3 years and move on with my life when I played soccer. So I started throwing, and I literally went in my first year. I was like, I might only have 4 months of this. I'm going to make them a great 4 months. Then suddenly I had a senior year. So I was like, I'm going to make it a great senior year. Then suddenly it was a reality to take a fifth year. So I was like, I'm going to make it a great fifth year. I had this note on my phone, and it broke down every single month that I knew I could throw, because I knew at most I'd have 2.5 years in college. And month by month, I'd look at it and be like, okay, the clock is ticking. And if you want to earn the chance to do this, you have to keep improving your performances. So I was like, I thought it would be so cool. And I think after that first year and a half, when I had a really rapid progression, I realized that I could keep going because I knew that I had done in a year and a half what, I don't know, that like, it usually takes a little bit longer. Sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it does. But I was like, oh, like this makes sense. Like I threw shot too. Shot didn't make sense to me the same way. Like hammer kind of made more sense. And then AG never, like, it wasn't like a really conversation. It was just, I made it to nationals for the second time and I did pretty bad. Like I finished, I think 19th out of 21. I was really sad and I was really bummed and I felt like I had let myself down and I hadn't improved my performance. And AG went for a run with me in Austin, Texas. It was super hot and we went for a run, which meant that he wasn't able to talk because it was so hot. So I could talk the whole run. And I hope if he's listening, he's laughing right now. And I just like talked about everything that I was worried about because I was like, I thought it would be so cool to continue, but I felt like I needed to earn it. And then at the end of it, he was like, I don't want you to live the rest of your life regretting that you could have given something a shot when you can do it. And I was like, oh, he's right. Like I knew he was right. And I knew I wanted to do it, but I had been so frustrated with not seeing improvements on paper that I had kind of just, I don't know, like I had a great weight season. I went from 63 to 72, but my hammer hadn't gotten better. And I was like, all right, like I'm going to do it. And so I was working for the summer. So like I was a physics major, but I actually did an internship in strength and conditioning, kind of combined my two worlds. It actually works great now for what I teach. I was working at like a high school, and then I got a job at our local fitness center and I was like, okay, I'm just going to do it. Like, I'm just going to do it. And if I regret it, I can, my friend Molly was like, if it doesn't work, you can always stop. I was like, okay, like I need to give this a shot. And so I started, and then I was a post-collegiate, and suddenly it was like, oh, this is really happening. And it was really hard at first. Yeah.
So what made it, was the difficulty, maybe the lack of structure of like being on a team where this is your set practices, you don't have, I don't know, like other responsibilities, like I have to pay rent now and I have to like meal, like all that, like was it just like everything else that you didn't have to worry about in college? Or what was like the difficult?
So I'd been pretty on it in college. Like I was a GA, so I actually taught classes in college, which was wild because I'd have like student athletes. I taught like a PE class, 2 PE classes, and a stress management class. So I had balanced that stuff and I had those responsibilities and meal prepped and whatnot. It was actually more that I was pretty bad. Like I was pretty bad. These workouts, and I'm not kidding, AG would tell me what the goal was. And I remember this one day, and I'm sharing this so again, people can hear it.
Sure.
I wish I'd heard this stuff. And it was one of his Ashland workouts. And it was, he had me take, I think 16, 18 or 20 throws with my comp ball. So the 4K. And I was supposed to range between 58 and 62, which like for me then would have ranged to be able to throw over my PR. And this is winter, like this is winter in South Dakota. It's 20 degrees, there's snow on the ground, whatever. I went out and I had great structure too. AG gave great structure. I had great support. It was more just like, I wasn't good enough yet. So it was a weird mental feeling. I went out and he was like, all right, when I was at Ashland, I got 20 of 20. He was like, so-and-so got 18. I was like, okay, like I can do this. I can do this. I got none. I got 0. Like I had to go back in and walk up and be like, I got 0 and own it. And it was so sobering, and to just kind of get my butt kicked every day and to be like, okay, there's other things I wanted to do in my life. Like I've deferred 2 PhD programs that were fully funded to study like my dream subjects in my dream towns. And I was like, I need to do this first. So to do those things was tough, but like, it was so good for me because it made me realize like I love doing it even when it sucked. Like just getting my butt kicked so bad. And then it actually coming around. And then that's actually when COVID hit. That was the year. So I went out and visited those programs because I had initially just been like, I'll do the trials and then that'll probably be it. And I had gotten these offers to study exercise oncology and live in a mountain town. And it was like, another one was in strength and conditioning in another mountain town. And I like went, did it. And I was like, I can't stop doing this until I find my ceiling. I said no to that. And then COVID hit. And then suddenly it was like training took a whole different meaning. So that's why it was really tough. Just the first like 6 months of it. Cause like I was just not training well just because I wasn't. No reason other than that.
Was there anybody like that you talked to about that in regards to, like my brother graduated from Penn State. He went on a full ride in the psych department and he has his PhD. Like I understand what he went through with those rigors, but to give up something like that, like, was it a conversation with AG? Like, is there somebody else that you were like, like you can always go to school. Like I tell my college kids that too, like grad school is always going to be there, but you're not 25 all the time or 24,
I knew that like career-wise and financially that like the right thing to do would be doing this program. But it was honestly like, I literally just one day we were training in this warehouse. We called it the Annex. And it was basically this like warehouse that had all this industrial stuff in it. And we had a corner and I got back and like the lights were all off. And I just started running sprints and being like, what am I doing with my life? Like talking it out loud. And I remember just being like, I can't not do this now. Like I can't not see how far I can go. And I kind of just had the conversation with myself after going on these visits. And it was literally right before COVID. And something that helped is I went to my first indoor USAs. I threw like 22:33 or something like that and placed 6, but I got to talk to people who did the same thing that I did. And after a tough fall, it was like, wow, this is a real thing. And I actually met Morgan, my boyfriend, there too. So that was really cool. But I just was like, talked to myself kind of. It was like, I made it this far. Like, I need to see what else I can do. Cause I knew that 64 meters senior season, like wasn't my best. I was like, what can I do with solid training? And then we had our COVID stuff and AG built us a rack. Like it's in my garage right now. He built us a rack. He got lumber. He got a metal bar. He screwed it together. We have these giant screws that stick out to hold the bar. He had lifting equipment and we were able to lift like outdoors. And at the end of the year, I threw 68 in practice at like a mock comp. And I was like, oh, I am getting better. So that year was validating, as tough as it was with everything going on outside of the throwing world.
So these last couple years, so post-COVID, so last season then, when we come out of this, kind of pandemic, was there, with the trials and everything coming up, did you still have, well, I'll just get through one trials, we'll see what happens, and then or is it we're just going to keep going until we think about that ceiling?
Yeah, I kind of have just taken it 1 year at a time because I didn't want to overpromise myself and end up in something that I wasn't improving in. Like I was like, I need to see that I'm improving to keep going. So my first year out, I had worked part-time at a gym. And then when COVID hit, I actually got another job as a like online grocery shopper at our local Hy-Vee. Because I was like, I don't know if my gym job, like if I'll be able to keep it. So then I ended up teaching fitness classes from my apartment. And like, this is like peak first lockdown. Like I would be teaching with like water bottles and like on Facebook Live. And that was my job. And then I would go and like online grocery shop at night. And then I would train in the afternoon. Anyways, I was like, this is tough. And also I wasn't making enough money. So then going into that other year, I was like, I need a job where I can have more money in the bank because I am no longer 19 years old. So I was an emergency hire and I was a full-time instructor. So going into it, I was like, all right, I can't do both of these things long-term. And if I don't improve, I'll be done. Like that's kind of been, if I'm not seeing improvements, like if I reach my ceiling, then that's where it is. But I knew I hadn't. So I kind of went into it and I was like, let's see how it goes. But I'm not throwing far enough to be like being funded or anything. So I need a full-time job. So made it through that year, and that's a whole different kind of story in and of itself with like balancing everything. But yeah, made it. And then once I threw 70 meters, I was like, okay, like I can keep going. And then I knew I would keep going, but I had to see the improvement first.
Well, there's been huge improvement this indoor season. I mean, it just wrapped up. You just set a personal best at indoor nationals. Talk a little bit about like showing up to these big high level competitions, right? Where there's a lot of stress maybe, and where athletes aren't competing necessarily for scholarships, but maybe for sponsorships. Yeah. And you set a personal best. how does that happen? Like, is it conversations with AG? Are you just the most relaxed person in the competition where if I throw 24, it's cool. If not, no big deal.
Well, I would say anyone who knows me well, probably the last word they'd use to describe me is relaxed. So like I am naturally a pretty high strung person. So I think the three things that went into it. One, AG trains us to be able to perform well when we need to, and he trains us to be able to perform well without a coach directly there, and just to be able to compete well. So like the training built up, and whenever he peaks us for a meet, I always just feel like $1,000,000. Like it's awesome. The second thing is this fall, he basically told our group, like, you should talk to a sports psychologist, because at trials, I did great in prelims. Then I did not do well in finals. My body was ready. I threw really far leading up to it. Like all my training balls were just going upwards. And then I went there and I got scared. He was like, your mind held you back, so you need to figure that out. I was like, okay. So basically, he connected us with Dr. Cinder Kamphoff, who lives and works in Mankato. And I started talking to her, had a few sessions, and she really helped me do some mental work that let me catch my brain up to my body in a way that, because I didn't grow up in the sport, sometimes it's still foreign to me that you have 3 to 6 attempts and that they're each their own event. And I just needed some help figuring out how to be confident, because a little bit of it was like, I'm still trial and erroring it. Like this is because COVID, there wasn't a season. So it's still, I think, like my 4th or 5th overall season. So like mentally, I feel like sometimes I'd feel like I had the maturity of a college freshman. She helped me get past that. And then the third thing was with work, I figured out how to manage my workload so that when I needed to, I could reduce my stress. Yeah. So that's kind of how the meet, like beforehand, I was able to prepare and feel ready, and just not caring, like it really going in and knowing that at the end of the day, we're literally just throwing things and seeing who throws it farthest. I think it's so silly. And and I know that there's money on the line and stuff, but like I think because I have a full-time job, and because I know that, so I won't next year, I decided not to apply for my own position. So I'll be stepping down from my full-time job so that I can train full-time and not also work full-time. But knowing that, like, at the end of the day, worst case is I go get a job just like I did during COVID, that the same bills will get paid. It's like, okay, like life moves on. Yeah.
Yeah, I wish somebody would have told me that, like the trying to balance and like trying to figure stuff out. So if there's a junior or senior this year that's thinking about training for 24, and it's a couple years out, and then there's that fear, what advice would you give them?
You can't do it for external validation. Like you have to do it because you want to do it, not because you like the attention or because you like the numbers. Because as a post-collegiate, you have to take way more responsibility over your own path. And I say that having like the best guidance I could ever ask for as a post-collegiate. Like AG is a fantastic coach in every way, but you still have to take ownership of your journey. So that would be part of it. And the other part would be like, make sure you have a way, like really, no one really said this, but like, make sure you have a way to make money, because you're going to be really stressed if you don't have an income, and there's already not a lot of money in track. So like give yourself the freedom to need space to improve if you're not one of the top dogs coming out of NCAA. Like I was so far from the top. Like I was literally, I think I got 19th out of 21, like 20th out of 24 or something. Like I was very at the bottom. Like I was not one of those contenders coming out of it. And I knew that if I wanted to do it, I had to pay my bills first.
So is it more than of like, I don't want to say like a grittiness or like stick to it in this, but for most, maybe, finishing 19th out of 21st, that might deter them to keep like moving forward. But then on the other hand, if you stick with it long enough, you might eventually, you keep 23 meters, 24 meters, someday 25, right? Is it just, you have to enjoy it? Like, is it more about loving the process? And if it goes far when it happens, then that's great. Like, do you have to, I don't want to say like live with it. Like I tried talking to AG and Kidway about it once a long time ago. And I think it was like 08 or 12. And, like he gave up everything, drove across the country with nothing, and is it, I mean, it's a little different now, but is that kind of like the mentality that it takes? Is, it really has to be like a burning passion there. Like you can't just, half.
Yeah, you can't half-ass it. Sorry if I'm not allowed to swear. I don't
No,
know.
that's right. I thought about it. I was going to say the same thing. It's okay. That's not a big deal.
No, yeah, it's like you have to love, like, deep down. Like there has to be something where like you want to go out, wake up before your job starts, go and clean the ice off of the ring, work, but know that that's not your main focus. Like I love teaching. I love school. I'm so excited to someday start my PhD. And that's a sacrifice in a sense that I've like said, okay, I can't do that right now, at least at this very moment. But then be like, yeah, I'm gonna go throw, and it's 18 degrees and like I'm throwing 10 meters under my best, and I'm like, I have to be okay with that right now because that's the time of the year it is. And then I'm gonna go get crushed by a lift, and then I'm gonna go pay for my like chiro because like I'm not on funding and all, you know what I mean? Like, and you just like, yeah, I love it. Like this is like you do like love the process, and have like, is my just desire, and like the why is just like seeing how far I can go and knowing that I can't come back to this later on. Like this is the one chance I have, and for some reason I got a chance to even start it, like the turns of fate that let me do it, and I just want to ride it out to the end.
So with I just have another question, because it's such a fascinating story. I think that's so cool. When you're working with Sindra, her book's awesome, by the way. Like I love the stuff the content that she has. Was there like a specific like strategy, like if you don't mind sharing, or I mean if you don't want to, like was there something like specific that like she shared with you that kind of helped put things in perspective? Or because you mentioned you take 3 throws and then maybe another 3 throws if you throw far enough, and that each throw is its own competition. Like
I think that, well, the biggest thing has just been consistency, because I've met with her a few times, but I do her work. So she has her workbook, and it's called, I think, like Beyond Grit workbook, Cinder Camp off. So I do that. Like I literally just before we started talking, I was doing my like page for the day, and it's just a set of exercises where the consistent built up effort, like truthfully, just like in training, I think that's what's let me improve mentally, because it's been repeated over and over. But specifically, she had me visualize before the indoor opener, and I had always just visualized the things I had done wrong, because I was like, these are the mistakes, I'm going to think about how I could fix them. But in doing so, I kept giving myself an image of me failing. And she actually had me think of times I'd succeeded, which felt really foreign at first, and specifically visualize success. And after literally like a week and a half of doing this every day, I remember being like, whoa, oh my gosh, like I'm seeing myself as a success, because you're hard on yourself to be able to improve. But I had taken it far enough where I was only seeing where I was falling short. And I finally started being like, oh yeah, I did succeed there. I did see this. And part of it was not seeing those successes as a post-collegiate, where like I hadn't, like this last weekend at USA's was so cool, because I finally was like, this is who I was in college. Like I am being the same girl that was able to show up, compete, be confident, and not care. And I hadn't been that yet because I was so far behind the curve. Like I'm throwing 64 meters, like I'm throwing against girls throwing 74, 75, 76, 78. So like, of course I didn't have that confidence, because I shouldn't have. I didn't need the confidence. But visualizing success really helped with not just seeing failure over and over.
Sorry, one more. As you were talking, so you mentioned Morgan. So is he like, do you train together? Like, is he a good sounding board for like this post-collegiate life? Like, do you mind like sharing anything about that? Like how like you actually have somebody that you can relate to?
Yeah, it's awesome. So we met at 2020 indoor USA's, and we just like literally sat down next to each other during shot put. It was a great shot comp, and I like don't remember any of it because we're just talking, and I was like, oh, he's like really cool. And basically like he visited, COVID hit, and then he ended up moving out to be coached by AG as well. But we do train together, and then we're also both volunteer assistant coaches for USD Go Yote Throws. And so we work with the athletes at times together too. But it's great because especially last year we were lifting in our garage, and there were times when it would get so cold that our propane heater wouldn't work.
Wow.
Yeah, so we had like an open flame propane heater, and it's cold, you know, like I joked my lifting gloves were mittens sometimes, like, but you had someone there when it really sucked. In addition to other teammates, both Ben Hammer and Michaela, who were there with us, but like there was this team aspect of it. And then also a knowledge of like, all right, bedtime's 8:30, like I'm not going out and drinking or like eating certain things. And I can't travel from Sunday to Saturday morning because of training, and like the lifestyle can align. So then there's just support in that. And yeah, like talking through technique, and also more just like, for me, I am pretty high strung and he's so chill that it lets me just relax and enjoy it, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, I think you two probably are close to like 50 meters PR in the weight. That's got to be like maybe the
Oh yeah.
top ever, right? So
We
pretty.
like, we like compete, like who's gonna throw further, like whose PR is ahead of the other ones.
Right. Well, it's pretty. I mean, adding them up, like 50 meters. It's like the power couple right there, right?
Yeah, we're working on it, but it's fun. It's fun throwing hammer too, because especially like travel and stuff too. You have a travel partner, there's someone, you know, you get it. And like if our other group mates were busy, we were able to lift together. And so that's been, it's been really good to have that support. And like with Michaela and Ben too, this last year, like having other people in it has been really helpful. So thank you for that.
So as a group then, when do you plan on opening up for outdoors here? Like, is there a lot of opportunities there, or is it more of like the big meets like Mount Sac and traveling to Phoenix or Tempe rather, things like that?
So I learned a lesson this indoor, which was that I overcompeted, and I basically competed 3 weeks in a row, and I just mentally, it was too much with work. Because I love, like, we get a day off, and I love my off day because it's where I can kind of feel centered again and just be a normal person for a day. And I think without that, I actually kind of had a really tough time coming back from my last meet before indoors and like getting back to a good spot. So I learned like can't compete that often. And that was one of those things where AG was like, look, you needed to learn that. So I'm thankful for that. But hopefully opening at Wayne State in Nebraska in like weeks. And then ideally going out to California for the Long Beach Mount Sac meets. Tucson Elite, which was so fun last year. And then I think Drake, but because I teach, I can't just like, and I ethically, I would not want to just be like, no class all the time. Right. Not fair to the students. So part of it is just like what works with training. And then the semester ends like May 1st. So then after that, I'm pretty free and clear.
Do your students do they realize like, hey, my professor's like this badass thrower, or is it just,
I don't talk
not really? No.
I try not to like let it in. Now, a lot of them are student athletes because I teach in our kinesiology and sport management department. So they're just more like, why is she lifting with us?
Right.
So that's like more funny than anything. I talk about it a bit. And if I don't know, I'm like, hey, I don't have office hours today, like I'm going to be competing, I just will tell them why, but I try to keep it out. But I think like some of them know. I don't really know. Maybe I'll find out after they graduate.
Well, I always wondered that, like, I had a athlete that competed at NAS, and he trained at Ashland with Judd and things. And I'd always ask him, like, if, like, do the athlete, or does everybody else on campus? I think maybe Judd, they probably knew because he was there for so long, but it's just got to be so interesting. Like, it would be like, hey, having an Olympian on campus all the time and like being able to,
I will say our track staff. So you have AG, 3-time Olympian, like 14-time or something crazy national champion. You have Derek Miles, 3-time Olympian, I think like bronze medalist. Then you have Chris Nielsen, 2021 silver medalist in the Olympics. So to just be like, yeah, I went to USA's, people are like, yeah, whatever. So, high bar, but like, hey, to meet that bar, pretty cool. So yeah, I think they're just like, what's the hammer throw? I'm like, yeah, let's just talk about class.
Just pull it up on Instagram to show them those YouTubes, right? Yeah. Well, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for sharing. Like I said, and I've maybe ad nauseum, like, it is so fascinating to me that there's athletes like yourself that pick up the hammer and the weight, and after, I guess you've been throwing like 5 years, that you're already at a point where you'd be considered elite, almost like international type competitor. Like, I don't know. It's just so interesting how some people are able to pick that up like that. Like, if I could get a kid to improve their PR by 5 meters in 4 years, like I consider that a win. And you're doing that, in the season. Like, that's so cool.
Thanks. I'm just really thankful, like, just for everyone around me who's made it possible too. So It's just something I'm really thankful to get to do.
Well, best wishes to you for the rest of this season, and
Yep.
look forward to 2024 or 2024, I guess, right?
Thanks for having me. It's really
Yeah.
fun to.
Awesome. Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you. You too.
Yeah.